We've all heard the success stories, but what about the failures? In this video, I'm sharing 3 real estate deals that went horribly wrong so that you don't repeat the same mistakes. These aren't hypothetical scenarios. They're based on real life situations that I've seen firsthand after working with thousands of home buyers and investors. And I'm gonna cover exactly what went wrong, how it could have been avoided, and what you should do differently. Today, I'm gonna tell you about Gary, someone who had all the right intentions, but made a critical mistake that cost him $12,000. If you're thinking of flipping a home, you're gonna wanna hear this so you don't fall into the same trap that Gary did. Gary's plan was to have a dream flip. He was a first-time flipper, and he was really eager to get started on his real estate journey. And he used funds from a cash out refinance on his primary home to finance the entire flip deal. When he did his numbers, he estimated that he would need around $250,000 for the purchase, the renovation, and the carrying costs all combined. And he did a good amount of research. He got several quotes, and he felt confident that he had his numbers locked in. But here's where things went wrong. First of all, he underestimated his cost. The renovations ended up costing way more than he expected, and that put him $40,000 over budget. Another thing he did is he didn't get multiple contractor quotes. He just went with the first quotes he got, and he didn't realize that the quotes were optimistic at best with their costs. Another thing that he did that really screwed him was he didn't have a contingency fund. There's always going to be unexpected issues like extra repairs or delays, and those costs added up fast for him. So to cover the extra money, he had to put all of this extra money on high interest credit cards, and he ended up paying thousands in additional interest charges. To cover the extra $40,000, he ended up putting it on high interest credit cards and ended up paying thousands in additional interest charges by doing that. The unexpected break in the reality check for Gary came when he went to go sell the property. The real estate market was hot, and he was able to sell the property for $10,000 more than he expected. But after adding on the renovation costs, the extra carrying costs, he still ended up losing $12,000 on the deal overall. So let's talk about the lessons learned here and how you can avoid the same mistakes that Gary made. Get multiple contractor quotes. Always compare at least 3 estimates to get a realistic range of what the cost could be. You want to build a contingency fund. Always set aside at least 10 to 15% extra for unexpected costs, because these always happen. Verify the ARV, or after repair value, with multiple sources. You want to work with an experienced realtor or a professional property appraiser to get an accurate projection of how much you could sell the property for after the repairs or renovations are done. And don't rely on credit cards for extra costs. If you go over budget, make sure you have a backup plan so you don't rack up high interest debt, which can really eat into your profits. Now, the next story I want to tell you is about a client named Joe who made a huge pre-approval mistake, and it almost cost him his dream home. Now, Joe was eager to buy a home for his family, and he had really good credit. He had a stable job for several years. So he went online like many consumers, and he filled out one of those online pre-qualification forms. But he didn't submit any documentation. He was never asked to verify his income or any of that. He just put estimates on how much he made, his assets, and whatnot. And from there, once he submitted all that, he was able to print out an online pre-approval letter, and he assumed with that letter, he was good to go, and he went out immediately and started shopping for a home. But what happened is, within just a few days, he got his home under contract and then realized there was a problem. Once his offer was accepted, the lender finally reviewed his income. But the bad news came. His loan was denied, and he didn't qualify on his own. His debt to income was too high. Joe and his realtor were in a panic because they only had 2 weeks left to get a loan commitment based on the contract they had signed. His realtor called me as a last resort to save the deal, and I reviewed the documentation immediately. I requested everything that we needed up front, and I quickly saw the problem. It didn't take long. Joe needed a co-signer. He wasn't able to do this on his own. He got lucky, and his parents did step in. They co-signed for him, but the rush to gather all the paperwork and get everything through underwriting, it was just a complete nightmare. It was incredibly stressful. And in the end, we pulled it off, but it was way harder than it actually needed to be. See, if Joe had worked with an experienced lender up front, we could have verified his income, his financials, and we'd have known right away that the cosigner was needed. So let's talk about the lessons learned here and how you can avoid the same mistakes that Joe made. First off, you want to always get a full pre-approval, not just a pre-qual. A pre-qualification is not a pre-approval. You need to make sure that the lender verifies your income, your credit, and your assets before you start going out and shopping for homes. You want to work with a real lender, not just some online form. Online lenders are often very inexperienced and they don't verify loan guidelines. And generally, they don't do a full, thorough review of your financial picture until it's too late in the process. Know if you need a cosigner early. If Joe had just gotten a proper pre-approval, he would have gotten his parents involved from the start and avoided all the last-minute issues and the last-minute stress. Give yourself time for financing. If you're buying in a competitive market, don't wait until after you find a home to start the process. That should be the first step. The final story I want to tell is about a lady named Susan. And Susan's a client of mine who pulled equity from her home to buy a rental property only to watch her profits completely disappear overnight. I'm going to break down for you what went wrong and how you can avoid the same mistakes that Susan made. Susan had an exciting investment plan. She tapped into her home's equity by taking out a HELOC or a home equity line of credit to buy a rental property. So she didn't have any of her own money in the deal. And it was a solid deal, great property that she was buying. From the get-go, her rental was bringing in over $1,000 a month in positive cash flow. And for the first few months, things were just humming along. Everything was smooth sailing. But 3 months in to her investment, disaster struck. And what that meant was a major repair needed to be done on the property. But because Susan used all the money from her home equity line of credit, she had no cash reserve. And suddenly all the profit she had made completely evaporated into the repair costs. So instead of making money and being profitable, Susan's sitting there, she's stressed out and she's scrambling trying to figure out where to come up with the money for these expenses. So let's talk about what went wrong in Susan's plan. First of all, she had absolutely no emergency fund. She assumed that the rental would be profitable every single month and she never factored in a major repair coming up, let alone 3 months in. She over leveraged herself. She relied too much on borrowed money, in her case, the home equity line of credit, and she maxed it out. She had no financial cushion. She had no other savings or investments to help her out when she hit those financial hurdles. She also had a lack of planning. She didn't factor in the risks. It was her first time, and she had unexpected costs that came up, but any astute real estate investor knows those costs are actually part of the real estate investing game and you need to plan for them. So how can we learn from Susan's mistakes? First off, you want to always have that reserve fund, that emergency fund for your investment. A good rule of thumb is to keep anywhere from 3 to 6 months of expenses aside for emergencies. Plan property maintenance, which costs anywhere from 1% to 2% per year of the home's value. That's to be expected. Again, 1% to 2% of the home's value every single year. Budget that aside for these repairs and maintenance costs. Vacancies and repairs can really add up a lot. So for the vacancies, we recommend setting aside anywhere from 10 to 20% of your rental income for these unexpected hurdles that can come up. And don't over leverage yourself. Taking equity from your home is a big decision, so make sure you have a backup plan. And I recommend that you use a mix of savings, investments, and debt like home equity in order to get the most prudent strategy for your situation instead of over leveraging and using all the money from one source. Before taking out a HELOC or doing a cash out refinance, consult with an expert to run the numbers and assess your risks. And make sure you have a contingency plan in place to make the monthly payment in case there's a vacancy or your tenants just don't pay. Real estate is one of the best tools for building wealth, but only if you avoid these common pitfalls. If you want help planning your next move, I'm here to guide you. And if you missed it, go check out my video on understanding mortgage rates. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.